welcome back to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. Got Kipp Adams and Ben Wolk with me on this Tuesday afternoon. It is SEC Championship Game Week. What a loaded show we got ahead. We're going to talk about Georgia, Alabama. We'll talk briefly about Georgia, Georgia Tech. We'll talk a little bit about National Signing Day coming up. Talk about probably the wildest Sunday in the coaching carousel's history. A lot to get into there. But first, guys, we got to start with the big flip news around Georgia football. Keelan Jones no longer committed to Georgia. He's flipped to Georgia Tech. Oh wait, there's some other flip news too that the folks will want to hear about. Jared Curtis has flipped his commitment from Georgia to Vanderbilt. This is one that had been rumored quite a bit in the last few weeks. Finally happens on Tuesday. Ben, I'll just set you up and let you run with it. Your reaction to the news, and I'll just ask because I'm sure this is going to be a question people have. Will Georgia sign a quarterback in this class?
This wasn't supposed to be a Jared Curtis flip show, for the record. We're actually starting 10 minutes late to the live show because of this. So we're reacting to this, the same way that most everyone else is. I think that the way that we've tried to report on this and the way that we felt this thing was trending over time, this isn't some kind of unexpected flip at this point. This doesn't feel the same, I wouldn't say, to the 24 hours a couple of years ago where all of a sudden Dylan Raiola is looking in Nebraska and now he's in Nebraska's class and it kind of just happened out of nowhere. We've known that Jared Curtis to Vanderbilt was on the potential radar for a while. And I think that now that we know he has flipped to Vanderbilt, the Georgia side of it was probably a little reluctant to believe that it was going to happen based on the conversations that they had been having with him consistently through those multiple months of that Vanderbilt push. It became clear when it got down to it that Jared was unilaterally making this decision. This was not a decision where family members that were heavily involved that had certain sways on it were going to make an impact. This wasn't a situation where coaches or even his agent were going to make this decision. This was a decision where Jared Curtis ultimately wanted to stay home in Nashville. I think that he's seen what Diego Pavia has been able to do, sort of running with the esteem of the Vanderbilt quarterback position when it's successful. I sort of put it in simpler terms when I described it. Diego Pavia is on the McAfee show. Diego Pavia is out at the front row of UFC fights. Georgia's quarterback's not doing that now. Georgia's quarterback's not going to be doing that ever. So if you're a guy from Nashville that sees a potential opportunity to jump on Vanderbilt when it's hot and sort of be the guy on Broadway and around Nashville, there's not really a better opportunity than now. I feel like Vanderbilt was able to catch lightning in a bottle with having this guy of all guys right in their backyard as all of this was happening. And it's, unfortunately to the detriment of Georgia. You asked the question, do I expect Georgia to sign another quarterback in this class? Right now, I don't believe the answer is yes. I think that they will not sign another quarterback in this class. Him doing it on Tuesday theoretically gives them some time to figure things out between now and Friday or even beyond if they were to want to do that. What I've been told is that's not expected to be the plan at this time. We'll see how that changes. What I think this does more, I've heard a lot of people say, okay, now all his NIL funds can be redirected to, this, that, or the other. I think Georgia thinks of it the way they think of NIL a little bit more positionally than that. So I think of what this will mean less for, does this mean they can now just go try and get LaDainian Guyton? Well, no. Georgia was trying to get Jared Curtis and LaDainian Guyton and other people simultaneously, though they were not mutually exclusive to one another. So I think that it's more now Georgia's going to really focus its efforts on obviously making sure that Gunnar Stockton is the starting quarterback next year, retaining Ryan Puglisi, retaining Ryan Montgomery so that you have that depth there. And not only do you have that depth there, you now have those two guys in-house that likely would carry over for the 2027 quarterback competition at this time, with who knows what happens in the portal in the future. So no, I don't think Georgia signs anyone else. It's obviously not a fun thing for Georgia to have to deal with again. Time and time again, quarterback stuff just gets weird in the Georgia world. I can't put my finger on why it keeps happening at Georgia over and over and over again, but I'll say what I've said before, and I'm going to just to tease something for Dawgs 24/7 later in the day too. I am going to write a column on this in terms of how the Georgia quarterback position is viewed, the wild things that happen in Georgia quarterback recruiting, but the consistent quarterback play that Georgia has gotten year over year over year for 5 straight years now, really, and the kind of dichotomy between those things and the why and the weird and everything, all that. So I'm going to write about that later today. Now that Jared Curtis, I thought I was going to be writing about it tomorrow, to be honest with you, but we'll be writing about it today just because it happened now. And yeah, I mean, Georgia's class certainly took a class ranking hit because of this one. I mean, I don't think Georgia's probably going to have a top 5 recruiting class now, and we haven't said that a whole lot in the Kirby Smart era.
Yeah, my predict to commit still sticks. It is not predict a signing.
Yeah,
I just want to get that.
We'll probably, there might be some funny business on Thursday's show with some predict to commit versus predict to signing.
Fair enough. I wanted to just kind of get into this, and we had written some predictions for, I think, Tuesday night that now will never see the light of day because Jared Curtis went ahead and flipped. But I was not surprised by this. This was a situation where there's smoke, there's fire. There was so much talk about this potential flip with Jared Curtis that it became apparent there was something to this. And look, these are not 1-to-1, and I don't want someone to hear this and make me think that I'm like throwing shade or like upset, because it doesn't really affect me whether Jared Curtis was coming to Georgia or not. It doesn't really change my job or what I'm going to be doing. But I thought about it a lot like the Lane Kiffin LSU rumors, where that stuff was out there and out there. And if you don't want that stuff out there, or if there's no truth to it, Lane Kiffin could come out and say, I'm not leaving for LSU. Jared Curtis could have gone out and said, I'm 100% a Georgia commit. That's not changing. That didn't happen. And I think that's a big part. I mean, that sort of showed you where this thing was headed. And my thing, I know Georgia fans are upset. I think they have a right to be upset because this has happened again. Again, not 1-to-1 with Dylan Raiola, but a similar situation where you have a guy committed. He winds up backing out of that. But this doesn't change anything that's been laid out for 2026. Gunnar Stockton was going to be the quarterback. I wrote back when Jared Curtis committed, I really like Jared Curtis's game. I think he can be very successful. I didn't see him coming in and starting right away. I thought that he was going to have to sit even behind a Ryan Puglisi because of Puglisi's experience in the offense and his ability. So it doesn't change anything. Georgia needs to keep its quarterback room together for 2026, where you have Gunnar Stockton back for another year, Ryan Puglisi as the backup, Ryan Montgomery, a guy they're very excited about, and then having Hezekiah Millender as well would be very helpful, having 4 guys. So I think it would be silly to say this is not a big loss. It is. I think he's a very talented guy. I think it's a guy that he's going to get to Vanderbilt, and whether he starts as a freshman or gets playing time fairly early on, I think he can be really successful. But the truth of the matter is Georgia has other quarterbacks in-house that they're going to lean on in 2026, and it's not a disaster, I don't think, when it comes to the quarterback room. They've got talent. Jared would have been very, very talented and would have, worked his way onto the field, but he chose to go elsewhere, and I think Georgia will find a way to get through this and still have good quarterback play. Kipp, what's your reaction to this news? Any thoughts you'd like to share?
I don't think anyone should be surprised by this news simply because, again, the actions speak louder than words. And honestly, the last words we got from Jared Curtis were that he was committed to Georgia, but then his actions didn't follow through, didn't back that up. He took multiple visits to Vanderbilt and then made zero affirmation publicly of where things stood in his recruitment. So, you didn't have that clarity. And usually if you don't have clarity yet, there's going to be an announcement. And then there's a decision still being made or a new decision made. That's just what we've learned in recruiting, all of us covering this for the last couple of decades. So I think that in the end, you saw the depth chart situation. Nothing's changed there. But at the end of the day, when it comes time to sign an 18-year-old looking at the path to playing time, that starts to creep up in the back of a quarterback's mind. You might have been okay with that in May and June, July, just thinking, yeah, I'll just, Georgia's got a plan. I will develop there over time. And then, you get caught up. You're like, but then maybe I could start in the SEC next season. And yeah, that Vanderbilt coming to Athens, that game just got a little bit more interesting now, thinking about, who might be starting at Vanderbilt. I think, for me, I find it interesting that, Diego Pavia still has the class action lawsuit. There's still that situation where what if in January he's like, you know what, man, this is a fun thing. Like I might just try to, come back and run it back one more time. That's still a possibility. And in this sport, I mean, we've seen what can happen and how quickly things can happen in the last 24, 72 hours in this sport. I'm not leaving that possibility out. So I think it would be fascinating if, he goes to Vanderbilt, Jared goes to Vanderbilt and doesn't start next season. You're not nothing's given to you in this game at all. But for Georgia, as of now, they're returning every quarterback on the roster. That needs to be their focus right now. That needs to be where things stand right now. And I think at the end of the day, like they knew the situation with Jared Curtis. They had already made it. This wasn't an NIL bidding war. If that were the case, he'd be going to Oregon right now. So nothing's changed there. I think that at the end of the day, like I said, being able to play potentially in the SEC your first year, right in your backyard, seeing what happened at Vanderbilt this season, that was something that probably was very enticing for Jared Curtis. And it is a situation where Georgia, usually its quarterbacks take a longer path to the football field. It is a gradual developmental system. And now you have to see this has happened multiple times. So moving forward, if you're recruiting high school quarterbacks, that's something where you have to figure out, like, we have not gotten to the finish line with this pitch. And after this season, will Georgia, I don't expect them to add anyone unless it's a very specific situation, or if, Ryan Puglisi or Montgomery look at it and go, I don't love where things are. I want to know I'm the backup or potentially the starter next year. Gunnar Stockton's that guy now. If they lose one of them, that changes everything. But as of right now, I think that could be a situation where Georgia's looking to the portal next cycle to increase the competition between Ryan Montgomery, between Ryan Puglisi. But I think for next season, I don't think anything's really changed at the quarterback position for Georgia.
So, Ben, let's just go ahead and have the National Signing Day conversation part of the show. Just since we're already talking about recruiting and how it's going to play out, I'll make sure and shout out. Stay glued to Dawgs 24/7 on Wednesday. That starts the early signing period, which is really just the normal signing period at this point. This was a big kind of domino we were waiting on, so that kind of takes a little bit out of Wednesday's coverage. But I'll throw it to you, Ben, and just tell the folks, what we should be on the lookout for, what you are going to be tracking on Wednesday. First, you got to unmute, and then you got to.
I was typing away over here. I wasn't trying to distract you guys. It's classic. Okay, so I from a news standpoint, there's two big decisions that I would keep an eye out for. 8:00 in the morning, interior offensive lineman Tyreek Jemison from Paulding County High School, previously committed to Kentucky. It was a Georgia Ole Miss battle until it became a Georgia LSU battle for obvious reasons. I like where Georgia is right now. Blake Stewart is making a decision between Georgia and Vanderbilt and Miami. I think it's interesting because I know that Vanderbilt was being very vocal to its class about the news that was coming and that Jared Curtis was going to be signing with them. And I think that once they knew for sure that he was going to be signing with them, I think they preferred it to be earlier so that they could tell everyone, hey, this is the guy that's coming with you. I think Blake Stewart is one of those recruits, and his family is very drawn to non-football related elements of Vanderbilt that have existed since the beginning of time. And so that matters to Blake Stewart and his family. And so I think that that's something that is making it an even more difficult decision. I like where Georgia's at right now, but I don't think that this is a recruitment that's done. I don't think that he has told either staff for certain which way that he's going. So that's one to look at. But that is a safety out of Woodward Academy that flipped from or decommitted from Clemson a few weeks ago. I think George has been doing a good job there ever since the official visit, but I still think there's a little bit to be seen. Terrence Pinnock is the one that little tease to my mock class that I had earlier today, which has already had some news validated from it. Terrence Pinnock, I'm sort of back and forth on whether he will end up in Georgia's class or not. He's currently a linebacker from South Gwinnett that's committed to Coastal Carolina. If you read between the lines there, you can probably pick up on some of the decisions that maybe Georgia's having to go through and where he kind of stands in the class, but he's someone that Georgia gave a late offer to. And I think that there is a possibility that he's in Georgia's class tomorrow or potentially by sometime the end of the early signing period, but I don't think that that's a given yet.
Yeah, stay glued for the next few days as things get rolling with National Signing Day. Ben, you want to shout something out?
Yeah, I will say I'll be at a couple of those decision ceremonies tomorrow. So obviously stay glued into Dawgs 24/7 just throughout the day because we'll have updates on that and some other things. Maybe it'll be a little bit lighter news day because Jared Curtis took care of some of that already today. But keep your eyes there. And then as I think Jordan alluded to as well, we will have a signing day show on Thursday evening with many members of Georgia's 2026 signing class. So I really want y'all we'll break down all the different position groups, just sort of my thoughts and insights from the class, of course, but really the highlight of the episode, I think, will be Jordan and I chatting with some of those players as well. So definitely want you to stay locked into the Dawgs 24/7 social channels on Thursday too.
Understanding that schedules can change, you want to tease maybe a couple of the people that you expect to pop on with us?
Yeah, let's see here. I mean, like you said, I don't want to tie anybody. People that have told me they're going to be on the show: Caden Harris, Nick Abrams, Kamari Brooks, Preston Carey, Zyke Helton, Braden Fogel, Craig Dandridge. There's a couple others that have given me single confirmations, but not double confirmations. So I don't want to necessarily tease them because I feel like they're less likely. But there will be more than the people that I just named right there. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, super excited. And I mean it when I say that when we did this last year, it's still my favorite podcast we've ever done. Very fun. We hope you guys will tune in for that one. Well, guys, let's make it quick looking at Georgia Tech, the win from Friday. Just some quick thoughts. Really, my biggest thing, very interested to see how Alabama plays Gunnar Stockton. I thought that he was kind of thrown for a loop with how Georgia Tech defended. A lot of drop 8, a lot of relying on that defensive front to bring the pressure. And they deserve a lot of credit. I thought the defensive line, even when it was just 3-4 guys rushing, did a pretty good job of making Gunnar Stockton uncomfortable. So really interested to see what Alabama does defensively. And then offensive line, which is sort of the key area that we're paying attention to with Drew Bobo. Not expecting him to be available. He hurt his foot in that game against Georgia Tech. You know, watching it back, I didn't think Malachi Tolliver played quite as badly as I did live. Now, the snapping was an issue, very high snaps, but I really thought post-snap that he played okay, that I thought, you know, there was a few plays where he missed, but he's a redshirt freshman really playing his first meaningful snaps. He's got to be able to communicate better. He's got to do a better job and just do a reliable job, I should say. Just as far as pre-snap communication, making sure everybody's on the same page. He's really a guy to watch going into this one. And the only other person I'd shout out, man, I feel like Gabe Harris has been, you know, shot out of a cannon the last few weeks. He has done a great job rushing the passer. I wrote about it on Tuesday that, you know, they've got to affect Ty Simpson significantly better than they did in that first game back in September. The bad news for Georgia in that game, they only had 1 sack. The worst news, it wasn't even Ty Simpson. It was Jeremy Bernard that they sacked on a trick play. So watching Gabe Harris, he's sort of that X factor for me. He's the guy I'm going to be paying attention to when we get to the game on Saturday. Ben, any lingering thoughts on the Georgia Tech win? Anything you want to share?
They're stopping the run really, really well right now. I mean, they've been doing it consistently for a month plus. I mean, really, I would say even back before the way they stopped the run for the most part in the Florida game against a team that has run the ball really well on everybody all season long. So that's what their identity was set out to be when the season started. That's what they've been. Does that matter when you're playing Alabama and they don't really try and establish the run game right now? I don't know. I guess that it's an interesting yin and yang to what they excel and what they struggle with going into this one.
Kipp, what about you? Anything you want to throw in from the win over Tech?
Yeah, I mean, with Gunner, everyone kind of points to, the interception as far as rattling him, but he was off before that. And I think it's just one of those games where, he started, processing early and missing guys. And even, he stopped hitting his check down and instead was just taking a beating, for a 2-3 yard gain. So I just think that's one of those where you chalk that one up and move on from it. And then, looking at Malachi Tolliver, everyone's kind of just all of a sudden written him off as not being, just being Georgia's biggest weakness. You got to understand, like, he got thrown in there. There's a chance he was just amped up, and your processing gets affected when you're just thrown into a game and like playing the most significant snaps of your career, knowing that now you're the guy. He's had time to process that now. And I just think that, you could see an improved play from him. He's not just locked in as, okay, Georgia's offensive line is just going to take a huge hit now. They're not going to be able to run the ball. He's gotten a huge number of snaps since the season began. He's practiced all along. He knows what to do there. I think that was just a situation of, I think that was an adrenaline thing for him in that situation. So I don't be surprised if you just see a different performance from him in this game. And then also just another reminder that, like, I think the defensive line has just come so like, from, we're going to talk about the Alabama game. I just think that Georgia Tech game showed, like, Elijah Griffin, like Christian Miller, all these defensive linemen, they're playing at a different level than they were earlier in the season. And I just think that you kind of seen a return, not to like 2022, 2021, but you've just seen a return to form from Georgia's defense overall. And the fact that, I mean, you just kept that Georgia Tech team out of the end zone still should be something that, they kind of they have some momentum going into, obviously, their biggest game of the season.
All right, one of the fun things about recording a show live is that sometimes there's just developments as we go. 12:27 p.m. Eastern Time, Jared Curtis has tweeted, "Don't know where all this is coming from. Haven't had a chance to talk to either school yet. I'll keep y'all posted." Guys, any reaction? Do either of y'all? Ben, you're shaking your head. What do you want to throw out there?
Look, here's the situation. As I see it, Jared wants to be at Vanderbilt. Jared wants to go to Vanderbilt. I don't know that everybody that's been involved in this the whole time necessarily agrees with that decision or the reasonings for that decision. I might even be speaking out of turn a little bit when I say that, but that's just my read on this situation. I think inevitably Jared Curtis ends up at Vanderbilt because that's where he wants to be. And I think it's as simple as that. If something changes, we will update you on that. Look, I know we don't shout out other networks all the time, but Tom Loy and Steve Wiltfong are on top of this recruitment. They have been for the last 2 to 3 weeks. They have been ahead of the people that are on the Georgia beat because I think that Georgia's been misguided in some respects in terms of how this thing was trending. But, I saw people say that it's not over until it's over until they've signed. And if Jared Curtis is flipped to Vanderbilt today, technically he is not signed with Vanderbilt yet. So we know that 24 hours can certainly get crazy, but Jared wants to be at Vanderbilt. And so I think that that's where he's going to end up being.
Yeah, I feel the same way. That tweet does add some confusion to what exactly is going on here, but I don't feel any better about Georgia's chances of landing Jared Curtis than I did when we started this podcast and literally opened with it. Kipp, any thoughts on recruiting? Just it's the gift that keeps on giving.
I was going to say, this is kind of what in our industry is the recruit saying, "Don't steal my moment." And I don't think, he's going to be fine. Looking back over the last couple of decades, I'm trying to imagine all the recruits where the news broke out early. Everyone got mad at the reporters and saying you stole his moment. And how many careers were impacted by that moment being stolen. I'm pretty sure it's none. He's going to be fine. But at the end of the day, like, yeah, he's 24 hours from sign day. If he wanted to tell everyone, obviously that's what he's saying. Like, guys, I got some news. Just stay tuned. Well, that's what all the recruits want to do. And at the same time, yeah, like we said before, when he was verbally committed to Georgia, the conversations were still happening between both programs. So, of course, both programs are going to say, just keep thinking about it. Keep thinking about it. Vanderbilt's like, you don't think about it anymore. You've locked it in. And Georgia's like, let's just keep talking. Let's see what happens. I mean, we've seen guys flip after flipping. Like, it could definitely still happen. I think right now this is just a situation where Jared's like, I'm going to announce this tomorrow. Watch me announce this tomorrow. That's where things are right now. But hey, if Georgia's going to continue talking to him, which they probably, I mean, you should be disappointed in them if they don't. But then the recruitment's going to go and until they sign, and then even then now, I mean, that transfer portal window opens up. He signs and then uses that transfer right after. It could still happen. So I don't think we've learned one thing is that, like, even when you think it's over, like, it might not be over.
Yes, and we saw that with the Cal quarterback who, started off at Oregon and wound up transferring. But again, I'm not anticipating that with Jared Curtis. You can never say never. I can say that much. All right, we're going to take a quick break, come back and talk about the SEC title game. We're going to talk about the coaching carousel. We'll talk Georgia basketball. Before we do that, you guys have missed out on the 75% off cyber sale. If you did, take advantage. There's still a 50% off sale over at Dawgs 24/7. As we just highlighted with the Jared Curtis situation, there's going to be some developments over the next 24 hours. We want you to follow along with us on Dawgs 24/7. Take advantage of that 50% off sale. Join the Junkyard. Follow along for National Signing Day, really these next few days with the early signing period. The playoff push that Georgia's about to make, potentially as the SEC champion. Georgia basketball off to a fantastic start. And then before too long, we're going to be looking at the spring and baseball, and Olivia Sayer covering the Diamond Dogs for us. So we hope that you guys will take advantage of that and be along for the ride with the rest of us. Because if you ever wanted a sense of what it's like covering this team, Tuesday was a great example. There's just always something going on. So we'll take a quick break. Be right back. All right, guys, getting ready for the SEC Championship game on Saturday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. That will be on ABC. Come Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, we will have on Bama 24/7's Mike Rodak to help us preview Georgia and Alabama. But before then, figure we talk a little bit about this matchup, about this game. We've had a chance to talk to Kirby Smart a couple times at this point. Talked to some players on Monday afternoon, getting ready for a big rematch for Georgia, trying to avenge that 24-21 home loss back in September. Really good stuff from Kirby talking about the opportunity that Georgia has playing the SEC title game again. He was asked at one point on Monday, he's now the dean of the SEC with Mark Stoops being fired at Kentucky, the longest tenured head coach now, Kirby in his 10th year. But I want to play a couple clips from what Kirby had to say and wanted to start with, he was asked on Sunday night about where this team has gone since that game in late September to where they are now. What has this team improved on? So what Kirby had to say.
Well, we've improved in some areas. We've gone full circle in other areas. We've got different, dealing with different injuries now than we probably were then. But the growth of Gunner would be one thing. He's played in more games. He's played in a lot of tough environments. Defensively, we've got guys a little more experienced. I think that's the biggest difference. Probably is that we don't like the guys that were young when we played them last time. They're a little more grown up now. They played more games. I mean, their guys would be the same way. So you grow and get better as the year goes on. You get more comfortable with who you are, and you tweak some things. We've moved some things around and tried to make some things better.
So looking at this Georgia team, where it is today compared to that game in late September, I'll start with you, Kipp. Where do you feel like they have grown the most? Where have you seen the most improvement with where this team is now?
Well, I can tell you Ellis Robinson's not the same player he was the last time they played. And you know what? Just the cornerback play in general. I mean, DeMello Jones actually got a lot of run in that game and looked pretty good. But I just think overall, like, we're talking about matchups in this game and what Alabama's going to try to do. That cornerback room is just overall, gained a lot of experience. And, we haven't even talked about the fact that once again, Georgia has a cornerback entering the transfer portal in Daniel Harris. I think Dominic Kelly, has gotten some run. He's going to step into that role. But I think that position room will be key for Georgia in this game. That's where you early on in the season, we said, like, you just got to be patient. This defense is going to gain experience, and I think it'll show up the most in that room. But overall, the storyline for this game is this is the redemption game for Georgia. Think about Nate Frazier, that fumble. He's had a lot of time to think about that fumble. You think about Dontrell Glover not hitting the edge on that play to Cash Jones and allowing Juan Gaston to climb, so Cash has a clean path to the end zone. He's had a lot of time to think about that. Talon Taylor being back potentially for this game, he's had forever to think about, that wide open pass that fell through his hands, a likely touchdown. Those are, maybe the 3 of the 4 biggest plays in that game. And all those players are, just chomping at the bit to get out there and have a different outcome. And rarely do you get a second chance to make up for that. So I just think that's kind of a big difference. And then having Ernest Green in there, I mean, that kind of changes the whole offensive line as well. So I just think that there are a lot of different parts of this game where Georgia has a chance to come out and just play a completely different game. And it is just about executing. And so they know that they're in the playoff. This is finally your chance to actually go out there and play loose against Alabama, knowing you're in the playoff no matter what. Go out there and play like, you're not nervous about this game.
For me, looking at this team, I think the biggest difference is something I hit on a few minutes ago. It's the pass rush. I mean, it was non-existent to start the year. If I'm remembering correctly, they had 8 sacks in 8 games. And again, didn't sack Ty Simpson the first time around. And, you do have to keep in mind the opponents you're playing and how good those offensive lines are, how bad those offensive lines are. But I think that you've seen guys take a step forward, namely Gabe Harris, who I mentioned earlier, and Quintavious Johnson. I mean, Quintavious, early in the year, you were sort of like, man, like, I don't know if this is really going to work. I think the last month, he's played fantastic. He made some big plays against Tech. He had a huge tackle for loss on a play where Haynes King faked a pitch and then ran it up the middle, and Quintavious got a hand on him and stopped him for a big third down stop. So, to me, that's the biggest thing. This pass rush, I think, has come a long way in a relatively short amount of time. And they're going to be counted on. If they do not get to Ty Simpson, it could look a lot like it did in September. Ben, when you look at this Georgia team, where do you feel like they've grown the most since the first time they played Alabama?
Well, it's funny. I know people were trying to ask a bunch of different questions yesterday on like why, like where is Georgia different? Where is Alabama different? How have things changed? Kirby wasn't really playing ball on that one. Like whether he feels there are differences or not, he was kind of saying, well, these teams are more or less the same. And I will say, I think that these teams probably aren't as different from then to now as we might feel like. Like, yes, I agree. The pass rush has performed better the last month than it was for the first half of the season. There's no question about that. Like, but you could probably say that Gunnar Stockton was probably playing better football then than he was right now as well. And I don't necessarily think that when Gunnar Stockton goes into this game on Saturday that we should be expecting anything less than what we've seen from Gunnar Stockton in big games throughout this season. Like he's been pretty consistent on that front in big games. And so more what I'm getting at is the more things change, the more they stay the same. And when it comes down to it, Georgia and Alabama are the 2 best teams in the SEC. you could probably make the case to me that Georgia, Alabama, and Ohio State are still the 3 most likely teams to win a national championship. Like, these are the types of things that no matter how many flaws it might feel like Georgia or Alabama has, it just feels like these are the types of teams that still find ways to win these big games against these other top teams. And so I say all that to say, I don't think there is a difference really between this and week 4 or week 5, whatever it was, in that I think you're going to get the best version of Alabama when they play Georgia. I think you're going to get a Georgia team that has played consistent and relentless and resiliently all season long. And so because of that, you're going to get a competitive matchup. I think the issue with it being a Georgia-Alabama game is historically we know Alabama finds ways to win those games against Georgia. And they all have been outside of the 2021 SEC championship game and I guess 2020 in Tuscaloosa. Outside of those two, they've all been close games, and Alabama just finds ways to win these close games. And so I think that if Georgia wants there to be a difference or wants to be different, it's that maybe they have enough times throughout this season learned how to win close games. And sure, it wasn't against Alabama, but they had to do it against Florida. They had to do it against Tennessee. They had to do it against Ole Miss. And maybe they had to do it against Georgia Tech. Maybe you do that enough times that you're battle tested and you are ready to win a close game against Alabama, because that's what it's going to take. They're just not the type of team that you're going to blow out, just like I don't think Georgia's the type of team that you're going to blow out.
Let's talk about the Alabama part of this conversation. The fact that this game is coming against Crimson Tide. Georgia now with a 3-game losing streak against Alabama. Kirby was asked about that on Sunday. He really did just very deftly dodged it and said, well, this is for an SEC championship. I mean, this game means a lot. Whoever you're playing against, it will mean a lot. Great job, coach. But the players, I thought, were really honest. I mean, I asked C.J. Allen, as successful as he's been, the amount of wins he's had, they want to, they want to beat Alabama. He's never beaten Alabama. And I'm going to read this quote that he had. I said I asked him about, does he think about the fact he's never beaten Alabama? Quote, no doubt. I think, to be honest, it's something I definitely kind of think about. It's crazy you asked that because I was actually talking to my mom about it last night on the phone. That's a team I haven't beat, especially in the SEC championship. It's a situation where on one hand you can look at it and you can say, man, what an opportunity. Georgia can avenge that loss and finally break this streak. On the other hand, you wonder, is this a mental thing? Can Georgia just not beat Alabama because they look across the field and they see those jerseys and that uniform and they just don't play to their potential? I kind of go back and forth on it, and I know when we get to predictions later on this week, you have to bear in mind what Alabama's done. And you have to bear in mind that we thought that Georgia could flip this rivalry after Nick Saban retired, and that hasn't happened. But, Ben, what do you think about the fact that this is Alabama? We've seen Georgia come so close to beating them over and over again. Just the hurdle that it's going to take for Georgia, not just to beat a playoff caliber team to win the SEC, but the fact that it's Alabama.
I think the fact that it's Alabama, it should be viewed as a privilege and an opportunity, right? Like, you're getting to play Alabama for a championship. They're the only team that's beaten you so far this season. You're the favorite going into the game. So it should be viewed as a chance to win a championship, beat a team you're never able to beat, prove a lot of narratives wrong all in one fell swoop. So this should be viewed as, a fantastic opportunity. I think the challenge for me is, and it's funny, I think we talked about this the last time that Georgia and Alabama played, but it just feels like Alabama somehow has the right matchup offensively for Georgia whenever it is. And what I mean by that is last year, having Jalen Milroe at quarterback and a guy that could just beat you when you're going, 10 on 11 and he's the ball carrier. He abused Georgia in the first half of that game last season against a Georgia defense that really couldn't figure itself out against the run, specifically against the quarterback run last year. Then you come into a year this year where Georgia stops the run really well. Alabama can't run the ball against anybody. Georgia can't really rush the passer. Alabama protects the passer really, really well, and Ty Simpson is going to feast when he has time and isn't getting pressured and he isn't getting confused. And so it's one of those things where, I do think I like Georgia. It sounds so ridiculous what I'm about to say. I like Georgia against other teams more than I like Alabama against those same teams. but I think I like Alabama against Georgia because of the matchup there and the fact that it's Alabama against Georgia. But it's also just like Georgia's not going to be able to rush the passer well. What we've seen with them the last couple of weeks, like what we saw last week against Georgia Tech, they're not going to be able to do that against Alabama. Ty Simpson, with Georgia not being able to do that against Alabama, that's going to be a little bit of a problem. And so it's just weird how in a year's time, Georgia's defense flipped in terms of what its flaws were. And at the same time, Alabama's offenses flipped in terms of how you would go about beating them. And it was in perfect harmony with what Georgia does. And it's to Georgia's detriment. So, I don't know. That's just my read on the game early on.
No, it makes a lot of sense to me. Kipp, what do you make of the Alabama of it all when it comes to this game for Georgia?
Like I said before, this is actually a situation where they've said that they're not going to punish teams for losing a conference championship game, but they're kind of on that, like, the fringe there, where if Alabama doesn't come out and play the kind of football, recently it's played against Georgia, there's still that danger there. When you're coming in, like 10th? What if Georgia does come out and play a complete game? They have a chance to potentially be on the outside looking in this college football playoff. So there's still a chance they come in this game and they do play nervous. I mean, early in the season, you can lose a game, you can lose 2 games and still get in the playoffs. Can you lose 3? We don't know that yet. Obviously, of all the teams that's going to test that theory, it could be Alabama. But I do think, like I said, there is still a situation where maybe both teams are playing nervous to start this game. And it allows, again, Georgia to get into halftime and make those halftime adjustments that they're known to be making. And I'm still, as far as the pass rush is concerned, one guy that we saw in the middle of the season and haven't seen the last couple of weeks, and I think that's kind of matchup based, who could still have an impact in this game, who I think should get more playing time, Zayden Walker. He had that, the stretch run where we're talking about, okay, this guy is good for, it might just be a dozen snaps, maybe 15 snaps, but he's making an impact on those snaps. He was playing very early on the road against Mississippi State, like out of nowhere. This is a situation where, if you're not getting home early on, you plug him in on the second or third series in the first half of this game, and maybe Zayden gets home, maybe he makes an impact at a big play. And so I do think, again, that's something that they're going to have to consider in this game, because it's still, this game has value to Georgia, because if they don't come out and play their game, they know they're going to a much quicker turnaround. They're probably going to be hosting a first-round game. As fun as that would be for everyone, I don't know if that's the ideal situation for Georgia at this point. I think you want to win this one, and it's one less game you have to play. So I do think that there's still some wrinkles that Glenn Schumann can put out there, and I think that Zayden Walker should be one of them.
Let's talk, too, about Gunnar Stockton. He struggled in that game against Georgia Tech, only 70 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Just not a performance we were really expecting after a pretty strong stretch from the starting quarterback. I asked Kirby on Sunday about Gunnar's play against Tech, what he made of it. This is what Kirby said.
He did some good things. He made some good decisions. He had some a couple times he had some pressure in his face where we probably missed some guys that were open, that he's got to navigate the pocket a little better, or just get rid of it, and try not to take a sack. Thought he forced the 1 ball for the interception, but that's not like him. So he probably played better than I actually thought after the game. And his, the ability of the offensive line and the run game really helped set the tone for the first half. And then, the second half wasn't as good, and they did some different things to hurt us.
I'll start with you, Ben. How concerned are you about Gunnar Stockton going into this game? Do you think that there were things we saw on Friday that could carry over, or do you just kind of chalk up that game as just one bad performance?
I think it was an everything that could go wrong went wrong type of game. I think that it was a combination of, Georgia Tech played pretty physically on the line of scrimmage. Their defensive backs covered up pretty well. He was having to go through progressions deeper than he has in some games that they've played this season. I think that he has showed all season long that if you get him into his third or fourth read, he starts getting pretty uncomfortable back there in the pocket. I don't think that that's something that was new to the Georgia Tech game. I think that when we came into the season And I put my hand up a million times now at this point in the season about where Gunnar Stockton has proved me wrong in terms of what his capabilities are as a passer. But when we came into the season, the criticisms about where he still needed to grow as a passer, like, it's not like those things have just gone away. I think Georgia and Mike Bobo have done a good job of playing Gunnar Stockton's game this season and playing into what he does well. I think that Gunnar Stockton has outperformed a lot of what the expectations in certain areas for him would have been. I think the fact that he has played at his best in the biggest games has allowed the narratives around him to quiet down. But like some of the issues that we saw against Georgia Tech, those were issues at points during the Florida game too. Those were issues at points during the Alabama game earlier in the season too. So there have been milestones throughout the year where we've seen that being part of the game that he needs to work on. But he knows that. Mike Bobo knows that, which is why they call the game in a certain way. And I think because it's a big game and it's going to be the biggest game that Georgia has played all this season up to this point, I think that he will play well because that's what Gunnar Stockton has proved to me at this point in the season, that he plays well enough for Georgia to win football games. And that's what he's done all season long, even in the first Alabama loss.
I honestly think it might benefit him that this game is back in Mercedes-Benz Stadium about a week since that game against Georgia Tech. And the biggest thing to me, I'm fascinated to see what Alabama takes from that Georgia Tech game to see if they can replicate it. Again, talked about Tech dropping a lot of guys in coverage, trying to make Gunnar Stockton find holes in the zone, and it seemed like, there weren't a lot of those, and he struggled with that. But I don't think it's cause for panic, but he does have to bring his A game. He has got to show up and show out, and it's kind of fitting. This time last year is when he sort of emerged, with Carson Beck getting hurt and him leading the way. He's going to be counted on again if Georgia's going to be able to win this game and just to secure a bye going into the postseason, going into the playoff. Kipp, how much concern do you have about Gunnar because of the Tech performance? Just what are your thoughts on him going into this one?
Well, I'm going to contradict myself definitely for the first time and say that center exchange is going to be important. Like, he has to feel confidence in Malachi Tolliver being able to communicate to the other linemen because that is the one thing where now you're missing. Now you know what you had in Drew Bobo, not just maybe the best run blocking center in the SEC, but also just a guy that was doing a lot of heavy lifting when you had freshmen on your offensive line and making sure everyone was in the right call. Now you have a much younger player, Malachi Tolliver, doing that. You have to feel confidence because Gunnar Stockton, let's face it, he is a confidence-based quarterback. Like, you can see when he's affected by things, it kind of impacts him the rest of the game. So he has to feel confident that Malachi is going to have a great week of practice and be ready for the game. And he also, you have to be willing to hit your tight ends. And that throw, the pick in the Georgia Tech game, it lingered for him and it impacted. You didn't see, the tight ends didn't really get targeted the rest of the game. And those are your guys. Everyone's going to look at Zachariah Branch. He's going to make something happen with little space at all because he's done that in almost every game. But I think your most dependable guys down the field are still going to be, Lawson Lucky, Oscar Delp. Maybe a play opens up for Elias Williams again. Like, those are the guys that you have to have confidence in and let it rip to those guys. And don't forget that, Noah Thomas came up big for you in some big games in the middle of the season. He was also just a forgotten guy for the most part in that Georgia Tech game. So bring him back into the offense and know that you have such an incredible group of pass catchers. They can do some heavy lifting for you and make you look really good.
Again, 11 a.m. Eastern time on Thursday, we'll have on Bama 24/7's Mike Rodak. He's going to help us preview this big game in Atlanta on Saturday afternoon. All right, coaching carousel check-in. I might have to go in here and edit me reading this and do it like the end of an advertisement where they speed up my voice by like 50%. Here are all the jobs that have been filled since the last time we recorded. We were actually in the middle of recording when the first of these was filled. Oklahoma State hires North Texas's Eric Morris. Colorado State hires UConn's Jim Mora. Stanford hires Washington Commanders QB coach Tavita Pritchard. Arkansas hires Memphis's Ryan Silverfield. Auburn hires South Florida's Alex Golish. Florida hires Tulane's John Summerall. LSU hires Ole Miss's Lane Kiffin. Ole Miss promotes Pete Golding. UCLA hires James Madison's Bob Chesney. Michigan State hires former Northwestern head coach Pat Fitzgerald. And Kentucky hires Oregon offensive coordinator Will Stein. We're not going to get into each of those because that would be probably another hour and a half, but I'll kind of leave this open-ended, and I'll start with you, Kipp. Give me one of these hires from the last, 3-4 days that you really, really like, and one that you think just is not going to work out.
Well, I mean, I'll say that the one that kind of stands out to me is Alex Golesh. I just think that on the surface, you're like, oh man, everyone thought it was going to be, Summerall. They thought that was going to be the pick, and maybe he was higher on the board. But goodness, have you seen the last couple of hires that Auburn's made? This was a guy that, Golesh was a guy that Arkansas thought they had him. He probably leveraged him to force Auburn's hand, but still, even if he was next on the board, I think you knew what your issue was this season. Anyone that watched Auburn football this year knew that offense was just nails on a chalkboard at best. It was terrible. The defense may have been the best defense in the conference, but they were outdone by an offense that just could not move the football at all. And, had a talented running back in Jeremiah Cobb, but didn't know how to use him. Had talented wide receivers, although they dropped a lot of passes in the last game. Probably because they forgot what the ball looked like coming to him. He could not utilize the guys you had. I think this is a move to fix the offense. He's going to bring up basically a variant that Josh Heupel used at Tennessee. Now it seems like every other coach in the conference, is running this same similar style of offense. Maybe it's not as effective now because everyone's seen it, but at the same time, for me, I think that their last couple of hires felt like an act of desperation. This feels more like a high upside gamble to me. And I just think that's a big improvement for Auburn. I like it on day one a lot more than a lot of their other hires. So that's the one I like. As far as the ones I don't love, it's tough. You think every hire is a good hire. I think for Ole Miss, you kind of had the circumstances may have forced your hand. You got thrown into a situation where you're in the playoff and you just lost your head coach. It's unprecedented. For this game, I think maybe having Pete Golding as your head coach fires everyone up. Having some of the staff in place probably puts you in the best situation possible for this season. But after the next couple of weeks, how ready is he for the Ole Miss job? He wasn't a candidate for any other openings. No one was talking about Pete Golding as a major college candidate for any of the SEC jobs. So I have concern about whether he can handle that role. Being a first-time head coach is tough. We talked about Georgia assistants potentially just being picky about their jobs. I think being the face of a program is just a different situation. And you're also just replacing, the most successful coach that program's had since, I don't know, I would guess the 50s and 60s. So, he's a good recruiter, good X's and O's guys. Is he going to handle the media okay? How is he going to do with donors are important now? How is he going to do with those guys? So I just think he's getting a chance. It's a great opportunity, but I just think that's a situation where they got put in a bad situation and they did the best they could, but I'm not sure that one's going to work out.
I pulled up the graphic for the folks watching on YouTube, and the reason Kipp got to go first is of all the picks we've made, Kipp is the only one who's hit one. He had Lane going to LSU. I misfired when I sent Lane to Florida. But any reaction for your one-game lead as the rest of us continue to just this?
Listen, I think everyone who's watching this will tell you, you'll take a 1-point win anytime you can get it. And you reeled off so many hires. I wasn't even sure if anyone else on the board had hit. It was kind of overwhelming, but I like where I sit. It felt like that was the the big question we had was Florida LSU. We kind of knew that they would move ahead of the Auburns and the Arkansas pretty quickly. but which one of those jobs would you take if you had the chance for both? And so I kind of leaned the LSU way. We made the argument that maybe neither. Like Ben made a strong argument that staying in Ole Miss would have been the move, which like he convinced me at that point. I'm like, you know what? Maybe he will stay. This is Lane. But in the end, LSU is, I guess, still considered a promotion from Ole Miss. A blue blood discussion is a whole nother thing because I think there's certain parameters there, but we're going to find out like whether LSU is a program now. You got your guy. What does this mean? Are you going to take the step because you just ran through some coaches and you were just coming off one of the best offensive rosters in college football? Can you get back to that with Lane Kiffin? But I think it's going to be so much fun to watch no matter what. So, it still is fun. I'm still wondering, who's taking care of Juice Kiffin right now. So I just think that it's going to be entertaining. I'm glad that he didn't leave the conference because it's better for all of us that we get to watch Lane Kiffin press conferences.
Yeah, the weekend delivered a ton, and that was one of the more entertaining things. That was nice that Georgia played on Black Friday because we could not only watch the Saturday games, but we could also follow along with all the stuff that was going on. Wanted to say, Kipp mentioned Pete Golding. I think that was a situation where Ole Miss, by the time Lane was officially leaving, I think they said, look, let's try to roll with what we have here. Basically give Pete a year. If it's working well, then great, we stick with him. If not, we can move on from him after the 2026 season and then go to market then and see what we can get there. The hires I really liked, Kipp mentioned Alex Golish. I think that's a very good hire for Auburn. I think that can work out well. Did a great job rebuilding what was probably one of the worst programs in the country when he got there at South Florida. They had really struggled. He consistently built them up. Liked Jim Mora to Colorado State. I had him, as you can see on the graphic, going to Cal. Think he'll do well there. People are convinced Colorado State's one of the better group of 5 jobs, but it's just never really worked out. Jay Norvell was never really able to turn the corner there. And the other hire I want to shout out is UCLA, hiring James Madison's Bob Chesney, a guy that people had kind of convinced, I think this is the last guy left for Penn State. Like there's no one else that's really in the mix or really stood out, but I think he's done a great job. I believe he was at Holy Cross before James Madison, done a great job at both jobs. Very interested to see how he handles going to the West Coast because his head coaching experience is on the East Coast, but I thought he would get a much better job than UCLA, and that's a credit to UCLA for convincing him to come on board. The hire I am the lowest on is Pat Fitzgerald at Michigan State. He really struggled at Northwestern, even when you toward the end of his time at Northwestern, I should say. Even when you ignore some of the off-the-field stuff, the firing and the lawsuit and all that, he just had lost a step in this new era of college football. I thought Michigan State, it was time to move on from Jonathan Smith. A few weeks ago, I had said he was my prediction of who would be fired next. They waited a little bit longer, but don't see that working out with Pat Fitzgerald and don't think that he's going to be able to hang with Michigan and some of the other Big Ten teams, the teams that have joined the Big Ten since he has been out of coaching. Ben, what's the hire the last few days that you are the highest on, and what's the one you're already kind of second guessing?
I mean, the one I'm probably the highest on is Lane Kiffin because it's like we were talking about. Like, if anybody had an opening right now, would they not have wanted to hire Lane Kiffin? I know people aren't thrilled with maybe the way that it happened or the timing of the way that it happened. But look, the moment that I knew, I had been the one, like Kipp said, advocating, saying, what's the point? Like, Ole Miss is fine. Job discrepancies aren't what they used to be, which I do still believe. The moment I knew that Lane Kiffin was going to LSU was when I was watching game day on Saturday and Marty Smith was like, hey, keep your phone nearby, coach. Lane said he's going to call you for advice. And then they immediately panned to Nick Saban, and Nick Saban says, well, I think that Lane Kiffin has built a lot of his roster through the transfer portal, and it's really hard to live like that. And at LSU, you don't have to do that. And I was like, well, right there, like Nick Saban didn't take any time whatsoever to immediately state the case for why LSU is clearly the better job in his mind. I think that it sounds cliche, and everyone that gets hired and has their introductory press conference says it about their new job. But I do think that the coaching industry believes that the LSU job is a completely different job from every other job. And I think that played itself out here. Like, I think that's the reason why it ended the way that it did. But I think that Lane Kiffin I think what Lane Kiffin admitted, and some people might disagree with this, but I think Lane Kiffin and any of his coaches that went with him kind of agreed Ole Miss was not going to win the national championship this year. And I think it's hard for people to accept that an 11-1 team that might have a home playoff game isn't going to be winning national championships. But when their head coach leaves and he's basically saying, I think my chance of winning national championships over the next 4 to 5 years at LSU is greater than my chance of winning a national championship this season at Ole Miss when you have to win 4 straight games to do it. I think it just tells you a lot about what they feel the ceiling actually is at Ole Miss. And I think that's a hard thing for Ole Miss to probably come to grips with. And I hope, and I think a lot of people probably hope, that Ole Miss finds a way to prove them wrong. I mean, I think people hope that somehow Pete Golding goes on a magical run and somehow they're able to put together a roster moving forward so that they can somehow prove Lane Kiffin wrong. I mean, the last guy that sort of did the same thing and took the LSU job, I think he sort of was proven wrong. Notre Dame is one of those premier jobs. Notre Dame is able to win national championships, especially in the current format of way things are done. And so he was proven wrong. Maybe Ole Miss will be able to prove him wrong, but until then, I think LSU did make the best hire during this cycle. Worst hire, they're all going to get fired someday anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Beautifully done. And I did want to bring up that before Brian Kelly, the 3 coaches before Brian Kelly at LSU all won national titles, which I think is part of the calculation. All right, we're kind of going to have a live meeting here. There are 6 group of 5 jobs that are now open because the coaches left to become head coaches. Do each of you guys want to give a prediction for each of those jobs? The alternative is you can let me do it because I've already done a little research. And now this gives me the opportunity to hit on some of these, but I don't know how vast your pool of Coastal Carolina picks are.
Yeah, I don't have a huge pool, but I can try.
Kipp, do you want to just swing for these?
I mean, I'm not even sure I know all the jobs that are available. So I feel like you've already planned this out, but you know what? Like it's live potting. Like this sounds like outstanding content that everyone's going to want to hear. So let's do it.
All right, let's start with Tulane. I think that's probably the best of these jobs that's available. I've got a name. Do y'all want me to go first, or does one of you want to try to jump me here?
No, go ahead.
All right, I'm going with Blake Baker from LSU, the defensive coordinator. I think that he's a guy, Lane wants to keep him on board, but I think he's done such a good job as an assistant and being in the state, what he's already done at LSU. I say that Blake Baker leaves LSU and takes over for John Summerall at Tulane. All right, I'll throw it to you, Kipp. Who do you got for Tulane?
I like it. You know what? I think I'll go with how about Shannon Dawson at Miami, the offensive coordinator? Just because it's a local guy. He was at Houston before he came to Miami. I mean, he worked with Cam Ward. That's going to be an easy pitch for them. So I think that, you know, it's a strike while the iron's hot situation. And I think if you can get a guy from Louisiana to come in, a guy that also like started his career working at Southeastern Louisiana, I believe. I think he was like a quality control guy, maybe worked on the offense there. It's just a great fit. So I think it makes sense for him because, again, you want to kind of be picky with those jobs. But, I mean, that Tulane job, like, it's been pretty, you know, it's born a lot of, you know, head coaching candidates in college football. So I just think that right now it's a perfect situation for both of them, for both parties. And, yeah, I'll throw that one in there and feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, I really like that pick. Ben, what do you got for Tulane?
I'm going to throw this one out because it's the only other name that I've seen tied to it other than Blake Baker, and that is Chris Hampton, the co-DC at Oregon. He was the former Tulane defensive coordinator. That's really all that I'm going off of. I don't know a ton about him. I don't know much other than he was the defensive coordinator at Tulane before, so they're going to try and dig into that bank.
Yeah, I like that one. I was kind of hoping you were going to go with Ed Orgeron, but no, I think that's got.
I would love that. I was considering like some sitting, like Charles Huff at Southern Miss is someone that's jumped some jobs. I could see him thinking that's an uphill climb, but I don't know. I like Ed Up.
Yeah, I think he might be back at LSU if Kiffin plays his cards right. All right, Memphis. I'll throw it to you, Ben. Who do you want for Memphis?
Memphis. It's a good job, honestly. I mean, coaches that have been successful at Memphis have typically turned out pretty well. I couldn't even begin to tell you who's Tennessee's offensive coordinator right now.
Lord, I don't even know. I will say that Charles Huff, I think, has gotten some mention from Memphis.
I'll take Charles Huff. Thanks for the assist. I'll go with the guy I just mentioned. I'll go with Charles Huff.
I'll go with one that I think is going to hurt if it happens, at least in state. Jerry Mack, Kennesaw State's head coach. He's from Memphis. He's done a fantastic job. Kennesaw State playing for the Conference USA championship. They'll be playing Jacksonville State. So I'm going to go with Jerry Mack. I'd hate to see that after just 1 year, but I have him going to Memphis. Kipp, sounded like I might have taken yours there, so best of luck there.
That's fine. I'll go with Tyson Helton at Western Kentucky. I think he's a guy that was coaching at Memphis a long time ago and has now proven himself moving up the ranks. The Hilltoppers have been a tough game for any Power 4 team that's played them in the last couple of years. They have winning seasons every year now under him. So I just think that, if you feel like you've taken a program as far as you can and you see that upside with Memphis, it makes a lot of sense. This is probably why, he should be a dark horse candidate for the Tulane job as well. I just think that he's a guy that has kind of proven himself that he can win, and that's the strongest one, I think. Just the fact that anytime you can have the Hilltoppers coming off a 5th winning season in a row, and they almost beat LSU, I think that's a strong resume for a job like Memphis.
RS Sports on Twitter is very upset that I have taken Mac from Kennesaw State. I hope it doesn't happen, but the fact that he's from Memphis, that kind of gives me a little bit of worry. All right, South Florida. I'll throw it to you, Kipp, on this one. Who are you going to pick for this job?
Oh my gosh, that's tough. Now I wish I had my candidate back.
I can jump in here. I'll go with just because I looked it up and I asked the question on the last one. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but Joey Howells, is that how you say it? The offensive coordinator at Tennessee. They took the offensive coordinator from Tennessee last time around, keep the same system in place. Maybe should have used him for my Memphis pick other than Charles Huff, but Jordan sort of thrust him on me. Doesn't matter. I'll use him for USF.
I like that pick a lot.
I like that one too. I feel like I want to go wild card here. You know what? I will. Let me think here. I'm going to go with someone who, if you want to make a big splash and he's unemployed right now, he's not hurting for money, hire Jimbo. It's a guy that would, rarely are you going to have a chance to hire someone with a national title on his resume, someone who knows Florida better, someone who, maybe he's ready. He's got that fire in him again. And also it's someone that you could probably save a couple dollars on because he's not hurting for money. That buyout money is going to hurt him negotiating for another job. So, but I just think that that's the splashiest hire you can make. And I felt like this is a great situation. I mean, if you're not going to go for a guy if you're not going to go John Gruden, you go Jimbo. That's the next splashiest guy.
I'm going to go with Glenn Schumann. I think that this is finally the opportunity he jumps for. All the SEC jobs at this point are filled. I think that if Glenn's going to be a head coach, he's going to have to take a group of 5 job. I could see him being in the mix there at like a Tulane or a Memphis, but I'm going to say South Florida. Glenn Schumann takes the jump and becomes a head coach, takes over, steps in at a really good time at South Florida. I think that hire has a lot of potential. All right, we will go to Coastal Carolina, and I'll start with this one. This is a name that Ben had picked early in the cycle, did not hit, but it's an unemployed coach, and it's Billy Napier. Billy Napier goes back to the Sun Belt, lands at Coastal Carolina. I think he strikes me as a Myrtle Beach kind of guy, and I don't mean that in a, not that's not derogatory. I think that he could do well there. I think he's a guy. He strikes me as a guy that does not want to sit out for very long. Did a great job at Louisiana Lafayette. I say that Billy Napier takes the Coastal job and tries to get the Chanticleers back to being very competitive, because they had a great run there at one point, and it's been a little bit down the last few years. All right, Ben, who's your pick for Coastal?
I don't have a good pick because I have no idea what type of job this even is or who would want it. I'm going to go with South Carolina. He has been South Carolina's receivers coach, Mike Furry. I've seen him out on the trail. He's been in some competitive recruitments. I think that Shane Beamer is working really hard to try and retain him on his staff right now. So I'm going to assume that he's trying to retain him on his staff hard because he's got other opportunities out there. And I'll throw that out as the option, even though I have absolutely no clue what kind of hire Coastal Carolina is able to make.
All right, Kipp, what you got?
This would not be coincidental at all, given the news today, but I will go with Vanderbilt's offensive coordinator, Tim Beck. I think, what he's done with their offense should get his name involved in some coaching searches. He's kind of new on the scene as far as being a Power 4 coordinator, but again, he's been really successful. And he's got head coaching experience, at the Division II level as well. So I just think, again, that it seems like a fit for him. What he did with Diego Pavia, it goes without saying. So I think that makes a lot of sense for them. You want to get someone who's just been involved in a prolific offense moving forward.
It would be a mistake for me not to bring this up. Do you know the name of the guy they just fired? It's also Tim Beck. It's two different Tim Becks, but I love it. They're like, hey, we don't have to change any of the signage. It's just not that Tim Beck. We got the other Tim Beck. All right, James Madison. Who wants to start it?
Go ahead, Jordan.
Breaking news on the pod.
Yes, I'm gonna go with this. I'm just taking all the in-state guys that are doing really well. And I am going to go with Mike Jacobs from Mercer. They have been fantastic this year. And James Madison, the last two coaching cycles, they have done a good job of hiring up-and-coming FCS coaches. And I see Mike Jacobs jumping from Mercer. He's been there, I think this is his second year. He was at Lenore Ryan before that. Mike Jacobs winds up being the next head coach at James Madison. Kipp, what you got?
Well, I actually now feel like we should have mentioned this guy with some of the other hires, especially like this South Florida. Willie Simmons, the FIU head coach. I think again, he wanted Prairie A&M, he wanted Florida A&M, and he got FIU to 7-5. So I think he did a good job when he was assistant at Duke as well. He's probably going to be a Power 4 coach in the future. Why not just take this? This is a great path to that. So I think he is an up and coming guy who's going to be mentioned for most of these jobs, I think, and probably get a couple interviews for some of these jobs that we've mentioned so far. So I think he's a strong candidate for James Madison, and I think they could do a lot worse than him.
We will get Ben's picks later because Jermaine Mitchell has just flipped his commitment from Georgia to Arizona State. So Ben is hard at work getting that story up for us. So we will go now to North Texas. Kipp, this is the last of these. Who do you have for North Texas?
Oh, my goodness. North Texas? All right. Well, let me think here. I think that we got to stick with the coordinators at this point. And so I'm trying to think of someone who's, done a good job at that position. Honestly, Miami's had a pretty strong defense. Corey Heatherman's the defensive coordinator there. I think I feel bad now because I would love to switch my picks with Willie Simmons here because I'm pretty sure that he was the defensive coordinator James Madison before. So he's got familiarity with that school. But at the same time, like, great young defensive mind, even though he started on the offensive side in his career, actually played quarterback in college. But that familiarity with both sides of the ball, I think, is great for team building. Also, just a young up and coming guy. I think that, whether it's, like I said, whether it's North Texas, whether it's James Madison, whoever hires him, you're getting that up and comer, the guy that could potentially be a home run and kind of take your program to the next level.
So for my pick, I am keeping it simple because I know that I'm probably not going to get this pick right, but I'm going to say that North Texas stays in-house. This guy very well could follow Eric Morris to Oklahoma State, but I'm sticking with their offensive coordinator, whose name is Jordan Davis. So I'm just going to keep that one simple and keep that one easy. Ben, give me a signal. Are you back with us to talk a little Georgia basketball?
I'm back enough. I could also probably give you my higher options for that while I just get this out on social media. But
go for it.
I'm going to ask you guys a question real quick. Who's the best FCS head coach right now? Or give me who are the hot FCS names right now?
Lord. I mean, I think that Jacobs at Mercer is really impressive. I mean, you got the guys out in Montana, but I don't know if they would leave for those jobs. It's probably an FCS guy or just like someone who's come up in Texas.
I'm thinking about for the James Madison job, their last two hires were Holy Cross and Elon's head coaches. So they're obviously going to go the FCS ranks, and they're going to vet the FCS ranks really, really hard. And I think that anybody in the FCS right now, even if you're at a good job, knows that you might be able to be UCLA's head coach or Indiana's head coach in 3 years. So I think James Madison's a good place to be right now.
I'll give you the name I really considered, which was Mark Ferrante, who is Villanova's head coach. He's done a really good job there. They are 10-2 this year. And
I like that. I'm going to go with that.
All right. You want anything on North Texas?
North Texas, you took their offensive coordinator, right?
Yes, sir.
I'll take their defensive coordinator. I have no idea if he's already left with them or not.
Love it. Absolutely love it. All right, throw it back to you because, Ben, you don't got enough going on right now. Georgia Men's Basketball Minute, you were there on Saturday for the big win over Tennessee Tech. Just thoughts on what you saw and what you made of how they played.
Well, to be clear, I actually wasn't there. I filled in for you, but I covered it not from the game. I have to be honest with you there. This team, when they force pressure, create turnovers, get out in transition, they're going to be able to score a lot of points. I mean, I mentioned it when I was writing about it after the game on Sunday that, I've really closely watched and written about two of these games so far this season. And it was the Morehead State game. And then it was this game this past weekend against Tennessee Tech. And both of those games, they score 115 plus points. Both of those games, they have 30 plus, 40 plus points off of turnovers, fast break points. They really dominated that area of the game. And now that I've seen it twice this season, it makes me feel like that's when they're at their best. That's the identity that they're going to have. They went with a little bit of full court man press in both of those games. And I think that's something that'll be interesting to see how they weave that in once you get into conference play, just because it's really hard to full court press and stay out of foul trouble with hand checking rules nowadays, especially with as physical of a game as the SEC plays at. So I think there's signs that I really like about this team. I don't know what it is about you, Jordan. Every time you ask me to write about this team, they shoot 45, 50% from the 3-point line. So I don't know what, bad vibes you've given to them when you're covering them this season. But when I've watched them, they've shot the ball pretty well. And I think that, Jeremiah Wilkinson, I almost called him Hezekiah Millender, Marcus Millender, Smurf Millender. They really were just making plays all game long. And I do want to shout out Cannon Catchings from that game. He had a plus minus. I need to double check the stat sheet, but the live stats had him as a plus minus at plus 50 in that game, which I don't know if I've ever seen that before.
Yeah, they have played really well when Ben's covered them, so maybe in some of the big games we'll have Ben tag along. I will mention this. We're recording this on Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern time. They play at Florida State, and that's a feisty little Florida State team, so that would be a big – if Georgia could win one of this game on Tuesday night, and then December 13th they take on Cincinnati. in Holiday Hoopsgiving in Atlanta. I think if they win one of those, they should feel pretty good with where they stand just on what they've accomplished at this point in the season. All right, we're going to end the episode right there. Thanks to everyone who watched this live. Thanks to everyone who is watching and listening to it after the fact. Thanks to Ben and Kipp for tagging along because there was a lot going on before we started recording, in the middle of when we were recording, and then probably more to come as soon as we get done. So thanks to everyone who is watching or listening to it after the fact. Be sure and go subscribe to Dawgs247.com. The cyber sale is done, but there's still a 50% off sale and still a great time to join because, as you can tell just from this recording alone, a lot going on and a lot to talk about over on the Junkyard. Sign up, subscribe to the Junkyard Dawgcast wherever you get your podcast. Rate and review helps us a ton. Subscribe to our YouTube, Dawgs247, our TikTok. Lots of great content. We're getting ready for Wednesday, National Signing Day. We'll have a live thread. We'll have a live story with all the updates. And as Ben talked about earlier, coming up on Thursday, we will do what we're calling our signing day special. We're going to have several of Georgia's newest players come on board, talk to us, discuss what it took for them to sign up to be part of the Georgia program and their excitement about what's up ahead. We hope you'll join us for that. You won't want to miss it. So we'll end the episode right there. For Kipp Adams and Ben Wolk, I'm Jordan Hill. Until next time, take care, everybody.